Hi, friends. Logan Clements here with another episode of the Better Events podcast. And in this week's episode, we sit down with Denise Glaser to talk all about on-site event check-in. Think of this as kind of a follow-up episode to one of our earlier ones where we talked all about event registration 101. That's kind of the prep work. And now we're diving into the experience on site and ways that you can make sure that your on-site check-in process, your first impression for your attendees at your event, goes as smoothly as possible. We loved this interview with Denise, and Mary and I each shared our own experiences with having a smooth on-site check-in process. We tackle everything from where and when you should offer check-in to utilizing your volunteers and certain equipment or tech that you might need to have available when you're doing your on-site check-in. So without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Better Events Podcast. This is Mary Davidson, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined by our other wonderful co-host, Logan Clements, and a guest today. So we are going to get into the topic today, but before we do, we want to plug our upcoming conference, the Better Events Podcast Conference, which is on Wednesday, December 20th. And so we'd love for you to attend. We're going to send you more information, but in order to do that, we need you to register your interest on our website at bettereventspod.com/conference. Fill out the form and just let us know if you're interested in attending, speaking, sponsoring, any of those good things, and we will keep your information and keep you updated along the way, and we hope to see you there. So now that we've plugged that, and we'll see you there, we can get into our topic for today. We have a guest joining us, and Logan's going to introduce our guest. So, Logan, take it away.
Yes, we are so excited to talk about all things on-site event check-in with Denise Glaser. After raising two boys who now give her 6 grandchildren, Denise has reinvented herself. Through several serendipitous experiences, she was introduced to the world of nonprofit fundraising events. Having worked in the nonprofit world for several years and seeing what organizations must go through to put on a successful fundraiser, Denise decided to start a business to help them out. Denise, welcome. And do you have anything you'd love to add to that wonderful intro?
No, that's really about it. Thank you guys for having me here. I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you here, and we
Yeah.
do a little tidbit too about why we asked our guests. And so, Denise and I have had the pleasure to work together on many different projects, and so it's been a pleasure to be able to see kind of this on-site check-in process and be a part of it through Denise and her team. And so, Logan herself has been working a lot of registration events lately as well. And so we're happy to just kind of all come together and have this conversation on the podcast about this really important step, event registration and check-in, and then also to have Denise share her specific experience, because this is really what she and her company excel at. And so we are going to get into the questions for today, and we start basic. We do this on purpose to make sure we kind of set, the groundwork for the conversation. So Denise, how would you define event registration or event check-in, and do they mean different things?
Well, I think you can call check-in at an event registration, but registration is actually the process you go through online to get your ticket and register for the event and give them all the information that they need to know. And check-in is actually the actual physical thing you do at the event to enter into the event. So that, I think, a lot of times they're interchangeable, so it doesn't really matter. But I think for today's purposes, we'll probably be using the check-in more so, if that's okay. So as far as defining it, really it's the process of getting guests into an event so that they're happy. That's what we want. We want happy guests to go into an event. We want them to have a positive experience, and we want also the organization. I'm primarily nonprofit fundraising, so it's not corporate events I'm talking about. Mostly nonprofit fundraisers. So we need the guests to have a positive experience coming in, and also the organization to get the data and the information that they need to successfully process sales and donations for the event. So that's pretty much what check-in is in a
Yeah.
nutshell.
Yeah, I know. Barely, if you can sum it up all in a short term, I think that was lovely. And we know on the podcast, we talk about different event terms that can mean the same thing. So, listeners, again, like Denise mentioned, we'll be calling it event check in. Just for our purposes, you might have heard it called something else. I'd actually interested, Mary, you've been to the UK. I'm like, I wonder what they call it in the UK, if it's even something
Oh.
even more different. Who knows? But Denise, can you first share with our listeners, like, where did you first learn about the role or the part of the event that is the on-site event check-in?
Yeah, well, I used to work at a nonprofit. And I don't know if you guys have any nonprofit background experience, but when you work at a nonprofit, when a fundraiser comes around, it's all hands on deck. So everybody gets just, pulled into whatever. And it doesn't matter whatever your gifting or expertise is, it doesn't matter. You're going to help. So I got pulled into the registration process, and those were the early days of long lines. And back in the day where we were swiping the credit cards with those machines, you had to put the credit card in the paper and then swipe the thing like that, and it would take forever. And so that's when I first learned about registration, and I learned kind of the hard way because I got dumped into that role, having never been to a fundraiser before in my life, didn't know what I was doing, and kind of was learning by fire is what it was. But anyways, those days, I think we've kind of streamlined the process now, but those days early on, they were tough.
I can imagine how it has definitely changed over the years, and I
Oh,
I would like to think that it's continually getting better. Hopefully, more ways to really get people through those lines faster, if lines
I
at
I
all.
think that it is, and it obviously changes with technology, but not every organization has the ability to keep up with technology. So as software changes, as we get, tap, with your, credit card or iPay or whatever it is, Apple Pay, um, things do get incorporated into the process, but not all organizations are able to utilize the technology that is available. So we just have to work with what, the organization has got.
I think that's a great, super important point for sure.
This episode is sponsored by Eventney, the all-in-one event management software solution that we have been loving over these past few weeks. Eventney's platform makes it super easy, which we love here on the podcast, to manage every aspect of your event using one system, from vendor and volunteer management to selling tickets and creating interactive maps. This tool is for you if you are an event organizer, especially if you feel like you're overwhelmed by trying to keep track of everything on a spreadsheet. You need Eventney software. We want to help you create a less stressful event planning experience, so we partnered with Eventney to offer an exclusive deal to you listeners. Sign up for Eventney Pro or Plus Annual and receive a $200 Visa gift card or enjoy 2 free months of their software. Click the link in our show notes to check out the offer and start your stress-free event planning journey today.
With event check-in, when and where should you offer it? Like, is there even a scenario during an event when like it's not needed, or you can bypass it or streamline it in a different way?
There's been a few events that I've done where we really don't have a check-in process that involves like laptops or swiping credit cards. But it's because usually it's a small knit group that they know each other. So if somebody is a guest in the event and they make a purchase or they make a donation, they know how to follow up with this person. They've got their contact info already. Um, and it's usually in unique venues. Like we did one last year on a ship, on a boat, and so they didn't want to deal with laptops at check-in on the dock, which I didn't either. So what we did was we just compiled a list, the old-fashioned way. We did the little checkbox on the list, and that was all. That was all that was needed. But for the most part nowadays, you do want to have a situation where you have an actual check-in process. Even in back in the day, I did a couple of events. I did an Expedia a Christmas party. I did some corporate events early on, but even that you have to check in. You have to. They don't want just any random person, walking in. So you do have to have a means by which you can check that the person is supposed to be at your event. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think in my head, you always need check-in if you want to have a record of who's coming in. And
Yeah.
if there's any level of security, which like I do sporting events and things where it is really like your credential, which I know nonprofits, maybe you don't always have name tags, but corporate or some other events will have like your badge,
Yes.
your name tag, or in events, I think concerts and sporting venues, we call it your credential that shows who you are and where you're allowed to go. And
Right.
that is something like for security is really important at these bigger venues. And I mean, I always phrase it, no matter what size event I'm working, I'm just, I'm like always telling people to take their badge or their name card or their bidder number. Cause I'm like, it just tells people we know you're
Yes.
with the group, you're in the right place. If you get lost wandering somewhere else in the building, they'll know to send you back to us. Like,
Exactly.
that's a big one. I think my other one I'd say you didn't need was I did a multi-day conference where we had a lot of folks came day one. And so day
Mhm.
two, we like really didn't need a check-in desk, or we really spared it down to like one person. It was more like an info desk of other
Yeah.
questions that people had and stuff like that. But I do feel like, Mary, to your question, it is you almost always need one, which is kind of bizarre
Pretty
to think
much.
about. Maybe weddings, you don't actually have a check-in desk at a wedding. Like
That's true. I
some of
just did
those.
one last weekend I only do weddings for family members, and we did not do check-ins, but we did have a table seating list, so we had to at least
There's
figure out
something,
how to
yeah.
get
But
them to
that's
the
probably
table.
why you have wedding crashers. And like you said,
Yeah.
your corporate clients and stuff don't really want crashers. And my pro tip for listeners would be if you don't even really have one, but you still want it to look exclusive, just have someone standing with a clipboard and a list at
Mhm.
your door,
Exactly.
and it will
Yes.
deter some people, even if the
Yes.
list is not a real list.
Yes, exactly. I've used fake lists before. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Just look there, look official, and just be like, excuse me. And then you'll
yes,
deter like half, 90% of the people won't even try it. But
that's right. That's right.
Denise, I'm very interested in like what items or technology do you need on site for check-in? You mentioned doing paper, but do you have certain items that you always bring with you?
Typically nowadays, because we use auction software at pretty much every event that I do, besides maybe the one on the boat. We do need laptops and a means to swipe credit cards, or mobile phones for check-in, or iPads, some sort of technology that um, associates the guest that's coming in with their supporter file in the auction software, and that also is going to incorporate their sales and donations into that as well. Because the whole idea is to have a record of who came in, get as much data as you can, and or as much data as the organization needs, but also to be able to process their sales and their purchases and their donations. So at the moment, that is mostly credit card swipers that sync with a laptop or an iPad, or something like that. So tech probably is just as simple as that, and also really a good auction software. I would say is a real important part of that. And most organizations do have that now. I think I have one client that still uses Excel spreadsheets, and that's it. I don't recommend it anymore. We used to do that back in the day, and
Huh.
yeah, it was grueling.
Good for
So we're
backup lists, but not
yeah, not for anything else.
Yeah, but it's like applications, right? You want good software for your auction or your, any event kind of check-in registration system. Because I often will get people are like, how many people are here? And when you have a
Yes,
paper list or even an Excel list, you have to like manually count. And I'm like, so many of these apps do like very quickly can say you have
account.
75% of your people who registered have showed up, or
That's
you're
right.
at 150, or whatever that number
Yes.
is in an instant. And that's like, I'm like,
Yep.
that's the value in some of this software is that
Yeah.
instantaneous, here's who's in the
Yeah.
room.
That's right. And we also, a lot of times, will have a guest come up and say, "Hey, is my friend so and so checked in yet?" Or, or the organization will say, "We need to know if this person who's, in the program is here yet." So it's a way, like you said, to just really access that information very quickly. So, and we don't, registration has become very streamlined now. we're not going to force people to do anything they don't want to do. If somebody doesn't want to give a credit card or something like that, or we don't make them. So it's really just a record of who is coming and in your event.
Yeah. And I know from the event side too, if just like things I've had to request from event managers doing check-in, also, like you mentioned, laptops or iPads. Also, I have to remind them I need power to the
Yes,
registration or the check-in desk,
Wi-Fi.
and
Yes,
Wi-Fi access or hardline access
yes,
if it's a weird, but the power one is one that like I forgot for an event like a year ago, and I've never forgotten it now. And it's something
yeah,
I've had to fight for on site. I've been like, I requested 2 power strips, to
yes.
be dropped here and here, and they didn't do it. I've actually started carrying gaff tape when I go on site sometimes, because also now I've learned they don't always tape down those power cords for people to
I,
trip walking around on them. So I'm like,
That's right. All
it,
stuff I bring,
yeah,
And a lot of times I even bring an extra hotspot just because
smart.
we've had too many times where, the Wi-Fi is not secure or it's not, stable. So we just are like, forget it. I'm just going to use my own hotspot, So, but yeah, definitely power, definitely Wi-Fi, and or a hotspot for sure. Those are things there's so much leading up to the event that you want to know and plan for before registration and before check-in even happens, and that's all stuff that you're just checking off the list.
Definitely. And everything that you've described, you're making it sound just so easy, Denise. I'm sure it's just I know it's smooth when you come in and do it, but there are a lot of people who kind of have to play a role in this, it seems like, as well. And so what kind of volunteers or event staff do you need at check-in to make it smooth and successful?
That is a really good question. Um, so, as we all know, that nonprofits and fundraisers are volunteer driven, and so there's a lot of volunteers that we deal with, which I love and don't love at the same time. Volunteers are great, but really part of it is having the right people in the right job. You know, um, a lot of times I think what one of the issues that we've had in registration is that, um, say for instance, we have laptops and you're dealing with software, and you have maybe a person who isn't really software savvy, who isn't even computer savvy, and you've got them sitting at a laptop checking in. It gets super hectic at registration and check-in. There's tons of people. It's chaotic. It's loud. You can't hear anything, and so they get flustered, and then they can't seem to just pull it together. And so that can hold up a line. Recently, I had an event where, well, one of the committee members was at the check-in slot, and she was visiting with everybody because she knows everybody. She's on the committee. She was part of the planning. She was, and it took a long time for her to check in each person because it ended up being, like, hey, how's the kids? What's the, yeah, where have you gone on vacation? And then the next thing you know, her line is like, 20 people long. So I think part of it is really making sure that you have the right people for the role. So I do like to have at least one staff member at registration that knows the guests, understands the uh, all the little ins and outs and nuances, the table seating report, understands, everything from the back end perspective as far as guests at the event. But the rest of them can be volunteers. It's just putting the right volunteers, in the right place. So, in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that's really crucial what you meant for right people in the right role, because it really is like the registration is a place, or the check-in is really a place that people can get flustered,
Yeah.
and my pep talk that I usually give, I feel like associations, even corporate, sometimes will try to get employees to help out with check-in in addition to using, paid event staff. And that's like,
Yes.
I'm like, just know whatever energy the person comes at you at the table is often nothing that you did. It's they had trouble
Yes.
parking, or they're running late, or the weather was
Yes.
bad, or something that I'm like, all you can do is exude calm, and like, you don't have to soak up anything that they're bringing. Just, go through our process. If we're asking for names or if we're asking for ID, like follow those steps. And I'd rather them take an extra 5-10 seconds, take a breath, than get rushed by whatever
Yes.
this person is bringing. Because it is like the first impression at your event that, you want to make sure it's an easy process. And tech is
Absolutely.
a big part of it that I'm like, yeah, you would need to be comfortable with. For I've done a lot of iPad check-in recently. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. And I feel like
Yeah.
numbers, do you have, Denise, like a number of people to check in your head based on attendee numbers? I feel like recently I like usually like 5 or 6 if I'm expecting anywhere from like 200 to 350 at least. But
Yeah.
do you have any rules you
I'm a,
use?
well, I'm a big believer in no lines. And so I am always way erring on the side of having more check-in stations than you ever are going to need. But I don't mind that, because as long as the organization can pay for it, because or man the stations, because it means guests are going to get in there quickly and there's going to be no lines. It used to be that they would recommend you have one check-in station per 100 people, and then that kind of went down to 1 per 75. And I'm typically like, I like to do like 1 per 50 people, personally, if I can get away with it. And then it ensures that you don't have any lines. I mean, what's the point of having lines, really? If you can avoid it, even if it means more check-in stations. So I'm a big proponent of having more than is necessary, if you have the manpower.
We love team no lines because yeah, that is
Yeah.
one that as a first impression, if you first thing you have to do is wait in line.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And then you're trying to run everybody out a drink so they can be happy in line.
Yeah.
you
Yeah. Or I've been
know.
on the production side of things and we've had to delay programming in the ballroom because there was such a long
Yes.
line at
Yes.
registration and the
Mm-hmm.
completely separate team. Like it was one of those things I'm like, it's on my list now that I'm like, has anyone talked to registration about how long it's
Yeah.
going to take to get people in because it delayed our programming like 10 minutes.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I'd be curious to hear what you do, Denise, because another thing I've done now at these last few is I'll usually use volunteers, and then it's myself as like a paid staffer to be there. And I always tell internally to the volunteers, I'm like, I'm the trouble table. So I always sit on one of
Mm-hmm.
the ends and I say,
Yes.
anyone who doesn't follow the standard system of like their name's not right or anything, I've been having to print badges too. So I'm like, I have the software that does that. So I'm like, just send them to me. All you have to say is my colleague Logan on the end will help you. And I've
Yes.
had then a line of a couple people, but sometimes it's them calling a friend to be like, I'm not on the list, or I had somebody got
Yeah.
registered as the wife of another guest and they're not married. They're not even together at all. Like,
Yeah.
and I was
Yes.
like, anyone who's different, just send them to me. We would never
Yes.
externally say I'm the trouble table, but I'm the exception. Whoever is difficult, send them my way. And that's kind of helped
Yes.
keep it
Yes,
pretty
that
quick.
is absolute. That's so true. I'm almost always the troubleshooter if I'm the lead at an event, or Mary, sometimes you're the troubleshooter if you're at my event with me. Um, but it's got to be somebody who understands the software, who knows how to think on the fly, who is able to troubleshoot a situation really quickly, and understands just all of the different things that can happen at registration that need to get addressed. And there really are a lot of issues. You have somebody who's coming in place of somebody else. So we have to assign them a bid number and get them in the system and swipe their credit card and assign them a table. And, so there's a lot that you do as a troubleshooter. It's a super important role. And it's always helpful if it can be somebody who absolutely knows the software and can think on their feet, and also kind of knows back on the back end, like, guest count, who's sitting where empty seats are, all that kind of stuff. So there was an event one time where I had a person come up and say, I'm so and so, and I have a table of 10. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm assuming you're in the system, but they weren't even in the system yet. So, and then it turns out he was an important person, and they wanted to accommodate that. Well, that's a table of 10 that you're trying to get in the system at registration. So then you're trying to connect with the hotel and the venue, and you got to get a table and 10 seats, and put all those people in, and it can be a lot. It can be very overwhelming. I think one of the things Mary and I hear a lot is that I just don't know how you stay so calm under such stressful circumstances. And that really is a good quality to have.
Key takeaway right there, listeners. Just if you think you want to do event check-in, a lot of it is just staying calm in the face of someone who's stressed or confused, and it's
Yep,
usually it's always a lot of people errors. That's what I often say. Like, you
it's
complain
true.
and like it's someone registered the wrong name or they just didn't. My favorite comeback for some people who aren't in the system and they're like adamant they are. And it's always like, can you pull up your confirmation email? And like, oh,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten one of those. And it's like, well, but we send those as confirmation that you
Exactly.
And then for me,
Yes.
it was like having the phone numbers of everyone. Like, if maybe you're not as in tune with the organization, or I had like the number for who was in charge of sponsors or partners to be able to call to be like, yes, is Mrs. Smith really, I have Mrs. Smith
Yes.
here. Like, oh,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith, let them in. No problem. Like, no problem. And
Yes.
like, I don't always have to
Exactly.
have the answer. I just needed to know who to go to be like let's confirm this is who they say they are and
That's right. And
how many
that's
meetings
a
to go to.
That's a good point to bring up, Logan. You don't always have the answers, but you need to know on site who is that person that you can go to and talk to about and get those answers. And so that is one important part of registration, is to make sure beforehand that you have that person that you're going to be connecting with for any eventuality that comes up that you don't know the answer to. And I like to have that person stay at registration and just kind of hover there, but a lot of times they're, of course, busy and doing other things, but at least have that contact, and if you at all can, be in touch with them via phone or text or whatever.
Hey there, friend. Are you wondering how you can get more awesome content from Mary and I and the Better Events podcast community? Or maybe you've been loving what we talk about with community over competition and you really want to figure out how you can connect with other event pros? Well, Mary and I are going to be hosting the Better Events conference in December this year, December 20th. And we're so excited because we just launched our early bird ticket sales, and you can take advantage of this special pricing all the way up through the end of this month in October. Hurry, run, don't walk. We've got a really cool general admission offer, but we also then have a fun friend of the pod VIP offer that just involves a little more higher touch experience with Mary and I, but we've got something for you. We even have student tickets. If you are someone who is currently studying and looking to maybe invest a little less, but still want to join us, we've got a ticket for you. Again, we're just so excited. If you can't hear it in my voice or see it on my video on our YouTube, this has been so exciting to put this together and start to see people already purchasing tickets, investing in themselves, because we are going to have a magical day on Wednesday, December 20th, where we all are going to get to meet each other, connect with each other, and all learn about how we can create and host better events in 2024 so that you can make next year the best year ever. So click the link in our show notes, go over to our social media. Our Instagram's probably our most active. Get your tickets. We cannot wait to meet you.
And I'd love to hear, not to focus on the negative, but I would love to hear some common mistakes that you see people making in regards to on-site check-ins so we can make sure that we avoid those in the future.
Sure. Yeah. I think the biggest one is not preparing well. And the other biggest one is not having enough check-in stations. Those are the two that we see really most often. Preparation is really key. I don't leave anything to chance when I am planning, the check-in process with a client. We go over every single detail. I want to know what information you want from that client. I want to know, do you need their phone number? Do you need their email? How are we going to start? Sometimes you're entering it into the system live. Sometimes you're actually handing them a card to fill out while you're checking or swiping their credit card. I mean, we're going to go over the process with a fine-tooth comb so that when registration happens, there's just nothing left to chance. So I think really planning is the biggest thing to ensuring a successful registration process. Now, having said that, the best laid plans, a lot of times things don't go like you think they're going to go. Once a big event I had last summer, the software went down all at once, and 20 stations were dead in the water. And I was looking at a sea of about 400 people right in front of me. And so that was like, you have to have a plan B. Okay, I'm just going to give you a bid number, and if you buy anything, come back later on and give me your credit card. And until, we fix the problem, there's really nothing we can do. So you just have to be able to have a plan B in case something does go wrong. It's not like I have to figure out a whole nother process for registration. It's not that involved, but at least kind of know, like, what would I do if the Wi-Fi goes down? What would I do if we lose power? What would I do if the software glitches like that? So that's always really helpful. Uh, Hopefully that answered your question. I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, I feel like I also see some people, whoever makes the layout of the space, it's usually determined before you get brought on
Yeah.
if you're the one doing the check-in. But thinking about the flow of like how people enter, you want check-in to be as obvious as possible, especially like for nonprofit like you do, Denise, like for
Yeah.
getting them their bidder card. For me, if it's like badges or like just making sure they're supposed to be in the room. I've had to use, I call it like human signage, actual volunteers to be like, nope, wait, go over here first.
Yes.
And thinking about that flow, or I've had some people who like to put name tags and things on the table where they're checking people in, and then people just start grabbing, they'll see their name and be
Yes.
like, oh, that's me, I'm just going to grab it. And I always,
Yes.
my big thing is I want like 2 tables and one's behind the people checking them in. Cause I'm like, I don't want people grabbing, cause that's how you get, I've just been a part of some events where they really
Yes.
care about knowing who came and making
Hmm.
sure we didn't miss anybody. And so it's one of those
Yes.
again that I think in theory, people are like, oh, that'll go faster. And I was like, you kind of have to save people from themselves a little bit and then have that process, but don't make it really far away or,
True.
cumbersome.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're seeing a lot of, in fact, most of my events this year, we haven't been giving the guest anything at check-in, maybe a bracelet or a little card that we're calling escort cards that tell them what their bid number is and where they're seated. But we're really not even handing anything out anymore. We're trying to get away from that so that guests don't have to carry things around and, deal with a big envelope full of stuff while they're having an appetizer and a drink or whatever. So we just like to look at all of those things, like what's the best way to do this so that the guest is having a positive experience and this is going to be a great night for them and the organization.
I think that's a great point, and I've been able to see that through you as well, and I think it has been super beneficial. So I'd like to see how
Yeah.
things are developing over time, certainly. And we've covered so
Yeah.
many helpful things today. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't yet covered about on-site check-in?
Oh boy. Let's see. I think it's really a lot of it is just, all about the details, making sure that you leave nothing to chance. And having a good auction software that works is always helpful. Um, and we've come a long way. We've come a long way. I think staying up with the technology is important. I've been talking to one of my partner softwares that I work with a lot, and they're going to be looking at possibly using the phones with some sort of code, or I don't really know how it's going to work, an app thing or whatever. Just being able to stay up with all of that and incorporate that so that, again, just make it as easy as possible. That's the biggest key, really. Make check-in as smooth and easy as possible.
It's all you need. That good, nice and easy first impression. And I think my only tag on to you would be to also make it really easy for your volunteers if you're not using paid event staff or experts like Denise, as a majority of your team, for listeners to make sure you have some really good processes and handover documents for your volunteers of like how to do all these things that she's talking about. And
Mhm.
also the common questions you're going to get. I mean, now I have like a template I use. It's like, where's the bathroom? Because you're going to get that question
Oh,
at
yeah.
check-in, even if you don't know, it's not really related to check-in. Or a recent one I've been getting a lot of was luggage storage, which was really interesting. And I
Oh.
worked 2 events that we didn't offer it, and one was in an arena that was not allowed to bring luggage in, and that became a little bit of a challenge there. But that was
Oh.
one I was like, lesson learned. Let's
Yes.
figure out if we need luggage storage, and if so, it probably makes sense to be near check-in, but
Yeah,
not
exactly.
one you deal with sometimes at like an evening event or something like that.
It's hard to think of everything. It really is.
Yeah.
You get there and a lot of times you're like, I didn't think of that one. Write
Nope.
that one down for the next time. But for the most part, yeah, just being able to cover all the eventualities.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Denise, for being here with us. Where can listeners find you if they want to connect or learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm at dnkevents.com. I'm on Instagram, DNK Events. And I've got my phone numbers on my website, so they can reach out or fill out a form on the website and contact me that way. I love to connect with anybody interested in having a successful fundraiser and getting their guests in. And of course, there's so much more we do, but we'll cover that another time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Denise, again for your time.
Yeah.
And
Thank you
we
for having me.
are excited for some smooth registration processes in the near future. So I'm sure that will
Thank you.
happen because of what we've learned today. So thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our episode, which we have our bonus tip today, which Logan has. So take it away, Logan.
Yes, my bonus tip is all about if you have a projector and a projection screen at your next event, make sure you think about how that projector and projector screen is going to look like with the lighting in your room. So, say you book a room that has big windows, make sure you think about the time of day because that could determine how easy it is to actually see your projection screen. Make sure it has shades or screens. I had a client who the screens didn't actually work or the shades didn't work. So, that's a good question for your venue checklist. Or if you're in like a windowless ballroom, that a lot of events get hosted in. Just think about like how your lighting for the stage area looks versus your seating area, because you want to make sure it's really clear what you're trying to show on the screens with a projector. But if you put too much lighting up, it'll wash out your presentation, or if you put too little lighting, it could make your attendees fall asleep. This is where I think LED walls are really great. They're just more expensive. So just think about your lighting when you book your projector or your projection screen for your next event.
Thank you. Great bonus tip. I haven't really thought deep about that before. So thank you so much for that. And thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. If you'd like to follow us, you can on any social media platform pretty much at Better Events Pod. You can email us at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can also visit our website at bettereventspod.com. And remember that you can also check out information about our conference at the same website, but /conference. We'll put it in the show notes. And then you can also connect with Logan and I directly on LinkedIn. We love to see those come through. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast. We will be back with you again next Wednesday.